actually, and they have admitted that the deficit was 6.1 and the debt is 57, on the old basis.
Okay.
Right. So I'm saying that this phenomenon has happened, and I hope that, what NDC can do best is, to expel the West, and in the event that the reserves are depleted.
I'm asking about the consequences because one of the things, when the Ghanaian people give you their mandate, when you walk into power, one of the things you get to start and have to deal with immediately is the repayment of debt. Because there's a resumption that is happening to kick off properly from 2025.
Yes, we've observed the harms, and we would have to. Remember when we spoke about the first sovereign bond and the preparation to take them off, right? That observation came stuck in 2013, and so the sinking fund was established in 2014.
Okay.
In anticipation of the $750 million US dollars falling due in 2017, had we won the elections and been very difficult for us, to pay down, and then our interest rates would have been much higher.
Okay.
And the loan that we used to refinance it, and actually that is the 10.2%, the worst that we did, with the MPP at the time, even though they knew the purpose for taking that money to avert, more serious. But once we established the sinking fund, you saw that the rates started going down. And 2016 we did, 9% to 9.2. So what I'm saying is that to be prepared, we just have to be prepared. And now we know that there will be the harms from 2026. The only respite will be 2025.
Okay.
And we know that even what has fallen due on the domestic, as a result of the balance that has to be paid after the haircut, some of it is falling into arrears. So we just have to be prepared. We know the quantum, we know the amount. And you recall that His Excellency has mentioned that one of the things he would want to do, is to two things. First of all, talk to the, energy companies that have left their oil fields and the rest, to come in as quickly as possible, because that is one of the things that weaken the economy.
Okay. Right.
And we'll come to it, when after they left post-petroleum era was 6.3, which is equal to, the pre-petroleum era. And then even with 3 oil fields, the average growth falls to 4.7. So even with 3 oil fields, of course, some of that, the period, before COVID was, 8.1 2017. That was the year they took it over.
Okay.
For the 2 fields. Then it started going down to 6.2, and then 2019 went up to 6.5. Then of course the West came during the COVID year 2020, 0.5, when we almost went into deficit, and it has recovered to 5, but it has never hit, the 8 or 7 that came with the onset of the 7.2 that came with the onset, of Jubilee before we experienced the collapse in, crude oil prices, and the rest in 2015 and 2016, which brought the growth, really low. But even with 3 oil fields, and that's why the flows, for COVID. You see, we talk about COVID as a cost, but we don't talk about the flows, which are about 6 billion, US dollars to resolve COVID. We had the IMF loan, we have the SDR, 2 billion, we had Bank of Ghana 1.7 billion, we had our own stabilization fund, which I was pointing out, close to 3 billion. So already you see, you keep adding, and then you can bring in World Bank, bring in IMF, bring in what donors and others gave us, bring in even what we, paid for those who are traveling, the jab and all those things. All these flows came in. So yes, there was COVID, but there were significant flows, and therefore the economy shouldn't have gone down the way it did. And of course, the audit, tells his story. The COVID audit tells his story, as to how those funds were used going into 2020 and all that. Yes, so there is some merit in what is being said, that we have to prepare for those harms. But those harms in 2013, knowing that in 2017 we would have had to cough 750, was what prepared us, to. So in short, what I was saying is that, as in the manifesto, once the oil companies come, and His Excellency has hinted at, probably been changing the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to a Natural Resource Management Act, so that we can have the resource to balance, we may be able to refinance that those two harms, and then smoothing the debt repayment path. That is yes.
Now, I like I said, I already advertised the question. Question is, yes. Typically they like to do an assessment of 4 years of John Mahama against their 8 years, and they usually do the first 4 years.
Well, of course, conveniently leave out the Mills era where we had the highest growth, of nearly 16%, and the rest, if you were to compare 8 to 8, which is what I think one of your questions was, pointing to. So what they're doing is to compare, 4, to 8, right? And picking the best years, in the 8 and blaming all else on COVID. Yes.
Now, then let's go through the indicators you're using. I just realized you were pointing to the matter of the GDP growth. Which indicators?
What I have here is a period before, before oil, because if you are going to compare the administrations, right, and we are using IMF data. If you want to compare the administrations, we start from 2004. Obviously, you can't be comparing His Excellency Rawlings and His Excellency Akufo, even though Rawlings discovered oil, it became commercial quantity, and Akufo, they never really exported oil. And even the first 2 years of Mahama'S, yes, the commercial, the FPSOs and things were being put in place. So it was only in 2011 that we started exporting oil, and we hit a growth rate of 13.9%. And then we started having the Jubilee issues and the problems, so it came down. Then we invested in 2 additional oil fields, 10 field and Sarkophile. And I'm saying that if you are looking at the record, one oil field, right, has performed better, 6.3, than the average of, and that's for even one oil field, Professor Haji's point, compared to, the muzzle of 3 oil fields and all that. And the average for that, even if you grant for COVID, is 4.7, yes. So that's the first indicator. So when it comes to growth, I don't think that, there's anything to say that they perform better. And I have some graphs, I've started tweeting some of them. Those who follow me, can see. And then when you come to inflation, we know the story already. Taking inflation to 54% and bringing it down, now as we are speaking, from 54 to 23. The worst inflation during their cycle, pre-oil, post-oil, and everything, was 17.7 and 15. So when you take something to 54, there's no way in which you can say that you are performing better. And it's currently at 23, which is even if you take that, high peak.
But on the 54%, and of course, what they have currently, they still insist that if you go across the world, the US have same issues. In fact, it was one of the issues that drove the government out of power. That
you see the fallacy in that argument. I know it very well, right? And you remember they used to say that, after even Britain, borrows about 100%, the US borrows about 100%, and therefore our debt's above 100%. So above 70 at the time was manageable. Forgetting that the US with all its 100% debt to GDP is borrowing at 4.5%, the 10-year bond. Right, and they have longer term bonds which are lower in the rest. So I mean you test your muzzle with it's like a lightweight comparing yourself to a heavyweight, right? And those are convertible currencies. The cedi is not convertible. You have to exchange the cedis, and then when you bring high inflation, then you blame it on dollar denominated loans and the rest. You have to put all of it together. So no, I don't buy that argument at all.
You don't buy the argument of the fact that there's a cost of living crisis around the world?
Was there a cost of living crisis from a global financial crisis? Was there a global cost of living crisis when demand falls and our cocoa falls and the rest? I'm saying that if you underestimate that and you want to point to your crisis as being the worst, and it's true, but before COVID, the worst crisis after the depression was a global financial crisis, which overlapped President Akufo and Mahama'S, and they managed it. And the more important point I'm making is that if you know there will be a crisis, and crises are inevitable. The time to prepare for crisis, as I always say, is when times are good. You don't prepare for a crisis when times are bad.
Okay.
If you go to the household, children will go out and play. They will, and come back sick and everything. The babies are even more vulnerable and the rest. If you get a pay raise and you get some bonus, the year is ending. You need to save so that you even can pay down your mortgage if your bonus is really big. So you don't prepare for, when the child is sick and you've depleted and consumed all the this thing, you go and knock on somebody's door, to borrow. Of course, there are people who have to borrow. I'm not, trying to condescend and say that everybody, people have a hard time, and that's why we use taxes and things, to support those people. That's why you have national health insurance that must be run well, to support those people. Because after all, they're also paying taxes, despite their low level. They may not pay income tax, right? Hey, but when they go and buy, they pay VAT on the commodity. That one is inescapable. The only ones that they can escape are raw food, basic food. If they are going to buy textbooks, then we've waived them under the law. Some, analgesics, defined by Ministry of, Health are also exempted from VAT, right? But some tax still sticks, so every Ghanaian pays, tax in one way or the other, right? And so that's why you put in the cushions, what our gender ministers and things were doing, yes, and they continue to do, right? So I think that, because, they were unprepared, and they were unprepared for COVID completely, despite the foresight, including Parliament, which included MPP members. Remember, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act with its stabilizers were passed, and in fact, some of those stabilization, measures were supported by Honorable Akufo-Addo, James and others, right? So it isn't as if it's an idea which was exclusive, to the NDC. And we started putting the money aside. If you stop putting the money aside, right, you have to borrow for the whole thing when you could have, nuanced the impact of it by 750, adding 500 to 750, or because you have 2 additional oil fields, let's say you even double it. We wouldn't. That's how you win yourself of the institutions like the IMF. So that's the point I'm making. That argument to a point, it doesn't, it collapses. Yeah.
Then there's the issue of debt, of course. It's a clear indicator. They walk into power shouting that you're borrowing yourself into problem.
Yeah, that's why they said what was the point in putting money aside for the sinking fund and all that, And as I said, we actually reduced the rate of borrowing after we took off essentially Kufuor's bond, and then we refinanced, the Dumsor and the single spine bonds, and so the rate that we lent, we borrowed the following year. So the point is that we borrowed, right? Let me make 2 points. We borrowed, but we started putting a debt repayment mechanism in place because we didn't have an effective debt repayment mechanism. So if we start borrowing, right, with a debt repayment mechanism, and you come, and we are able to do infrastructure, and still have leave a 57%, rate, right? Of course, on an old basis, we're getting, close to 70 and all that. So we started putting these measures in place. But of course, now all of us are being measured by the new basis, 57%. And you come and virtually double it, and you stop the repayment mechanism. Why do you go back and blame, President Mahama or myself for starting the borrowing? We started borrowing, we did self-financing, right? For certain projects, which is why when we're in the fund program, we're able to do those projects. Because we're sacrificing money that was going into the budget for consumption to do infrastructure. So I'm afraid, so if you came following us thinking that borrowing was cheap and whatever, it's like two race drivers, right? If you keep following the efficient one and it's, driving, and if you don't take it, you would crash.
Yeah, you think that's what has happened?
But the default is the crash.
So
the haircut. You just go and ask, somebody who suffered a haircut from pensions, from money which they are putting aside to pay school fees. Remember when the haircut came? People were saying, this money I put aside, for my children's school fees. But the effect of it is that they have destroyed that market, which Ghanaians, today they can go back to the 3-year bond. And that's when I say they've destroyed the market. The 3-year bond and the 5-year bond. Yes, even when they entered, when they concluded, remember, Minister of Finance said, "Oh, we are going back. We are back into the market. Where's the market? Where's the borrowing? Right? We are still out of the market. But this was a market, which we have built so that Ghanaians. Let me tell you, those bonds were being issued on behalf of Ghanaians by Bank of Ghana. So they became bonds because we moved them and put them in the Ghana Stock Exchange so that they can be flexible. Because if you need the money, and that's where we supported that one too with a sinking fund, right? So we started, measuring what is the level that is reasonable so that when somebody needs his money, right, we can pay, right? So what we're doing was that we managing with the big banks. So when somebody needs their money, they would liquidate because we buy the bonds, if you remember, through your banks.
Okay.
So the banks, when we are doing the next one you call the calendar, we calculate what we should pay off so that it becomes reasonable, right? And that's the only way Ghanaians will have confidence in what you call the development of that's what it means to develop the domestic financial market,
okay,
which is cedi. If you bring in dollars, we pay you back cedis, but you must prepare that somebody in the diaspora who buys, the bond in dollars will come, and demand his money. All those monies were being chopped without. So don't come and say that we were borrowing. We were borrowing and putting a repayment mechanism in place. Is there 2 employees in this studio who go to take a mortgage, to pay? One goes to take a mortgage to buy a car first. The other one follows and also takes a mortgage. And then you stop paying your mortgage. And they seize your car. Or you crash your car. Whatever the reason. And then you say, after you started the borrowing, so what? So you also continue the borrowing without the mechanism that would have made it more efficient for us, as Botswana is doing today. Botswana has good ratings. So if you have reached that point, then you can borrow at 4%, not 8%. You can borrow at 5%.
Well, we have to be wrapping up.
Yes.
There's a comment that came from Akufo-Addo. Akufo-Addo says, "I completely disagree with Seth Terkper.
Yes.
He should please read the room. The only reason this government has any chance of any success in this election is because of free SHS. The thousands of market women who are going and expressing their intention to vote MPPs because of free SHS. It is so frustrating to have NDC Titans repeat the mistake of 2016. Your opponent puts out a clear one.
No, but we are not
one phrase. Please,
yes.
So honorable, just a moment. Your opponent puts out a clear one phrase election campaign promise. And you spend minutes in parsimonious minutia explaining why it cannot be done. I'm sorry, this is how you lose votes. No citizen likes their benefits taken away. This is an election year." That's coming from him.
No, yes, it's an election year. So it's about messaging. My point, right, with the insight, right, is to provide the information. And then we do the messaging. Should I sit on what I know, right, as the most effective way? It's about messaging. So where is the messaging that, yes, they are saying this, but it's led to default and all that, right? So I'm afraid if the point being made is that, and mind you, I agree with him. It's simple messaging is very important. That's why we have experts, in that field. But I'm saying, yes, let's do the messaging. But you can't do a simple message if you don't have the facts.
Okay.
Right? And mind you, excuse me to say, there are middle class academics and others who are also listening. Right? Who know that we've defaulted. Who know, all these things. So I don't think it's a straightforward, it's not being parsimonious or anything. It's my responsibility, to show the nuances of the things so that those our communicators and others can carry it out, in radio stations like yours and the rest all over. And I hope that, at least it has gone to some extent, to help them communicate. So I'm afraid, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not being parsimonious. I'm not being naive, with after all, they had, that's the only way they won elections, is to distort our record. I remember very well when I used to say, it was like sour grapes, it was whatever, that we did not leave a deficit of 8.3. The fact that, somebody went around, and said, propagated, and the same thing is happening, that we left a debt of 8.3, 10.3, and whatever. And I kept saying that we did not leave it until our parliamentarians forced, His Excellency, the president to admit that the deficit we left was 6.1 in a SONA.
So
and it has not been corrected, right? Yes. So I'm saying I agree, but there's a point in communication, and we have strengths. So I'm afraid. I mean, I shouldn't be faulted by coming out with the facts. No. Yes.
This is Eduji Tamaklo. He says, excellent exposition by Honorable Seth Terkper. He's such a calming voice. There's okay, this one is a different matter. There are a few comments that are being shared on Facebook too. Kale Yugodi says, under this government, we are not paying our loans. So for me, this is not recovering. They are only deceiving us. If they are to be paying our debts, dollar could have been 25 Ghana cedis by now. And
they wouldn't have been refinancing the T-bills. Okay. They use new money, they borrow new money. Instead of paying down the old, they add it. And this is what we are going to inherit. And this education we have to give. Yes.
And then it continues. I just fear for my NDC when they assume power and they are to start paying foreign loans. NDC needs to start doing something now to solve the debt problem immediately they assume power. In fact, Honorable Seth Terkper pointed out that these are things that they are thinking about. They are calculating these effects. Bismarck Odoi says, I like the way the MPP has been pampered by the so-called journalists since 2017 till they are fallen flat with disgrace. Is it not a shame for Nana Bawumia to leave office without paying their external debt? Alexa Haji says, okay, I think that I'm back to the Alexa Haji matter where he was asking me to do the calculation. We're going to an election. What will be your message to the Ghanaian?
My message to the Ghanaian that the record is clear. The Mahama never defaulted. The Mahama never took anybody's pension. Did any haircut, and all that. And that in actual fact, we were on the path to reducing the debt. The records are there. And we should have confidence in the Mahama record. It's for real. We did all this infrastructure and we they say they are surpassing, but we never defaulted. We never took any money. We put all money aside, just like the household will do when they go and borrow. That is the discipline that the nation needs. How much infrastructure, let's say it visibly. It's not the new infrastructure that is being done. For example, electric buses, yes, they are good. And we must move towards electric buses. But what happened to the Yalolo buses? What happened to the, Achimota to, the station that was done and whatever? Abandoned just because it was Mahama? Is that no public transit? Right? And up to date, my last point, to date, because Mahama, we don't have the third bridge over the Volta.
The Volivo Bridge.
The Volivo Bridge, right? And they wanted to claim credit, and immediately we came out to say that we took the loan. Or the Akosomo Railway Line, where is the transit? It comes with transit and a cargo, right? So I rest my case. Thank you very much.
How are the Krobo constituencies?
We are a stronghold, and
we'll
have to keep the seats, all three Krobo constituencies.
All three?
It's very important, yes.
Lower, upper, yellow.
And yellow, yes.
You're sure the NDC
Upper Manya, lower Manya, yes.
We'll keep all.
We lost one, we wrestled it back. And I don't think that we want, to give it up.
What's the target there? What are you working towards aside there? Because
we are targeting, I can't recall the figures, but we are targeting towards increasing the numbers because you don't rest when you are a stronghold. You increase the votes for the presidency as well.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't rest just because you think your MP would, so it's our goal. I think our goals are similar to, Garura, parts of the Volta region, even places in Ashanti and the rest. Yes, it's the same goal. So we are seriously working with, as we speak, the youth. JM has gone, the youth, have come through, the women have come through. Yes, so. And another year later, and the rest, they are all coming to help. Yes.
Always a pleasure to host you. Always enlightening. So much. You learn so much, and you know how to approach some of the issues. You have been one of my teachers when it comes to finance and economy. Fantastic to have you as always. I was Seth Terkper, Summer Finance Minister. Join us in studio again. Always a pleasure hosting you on the Gold Morning Conversation. We've had many of these conversations since this government started. Majority of what you are able to see